Amazon, the last call.
We begin today's chapter with a number of surprises. We are at the mouth of the Amazon River. There are boats, and I am on top of an incredible animal from other worlds, but one that has clearly integrated itself into this territory, and did so a long time ago. This is our last program of this series, and our last journey through the Amazon River, riding on the back of a buffalo. It's going to take quite an effort for us to bid farewell to this river and friend. We're going to travel its shores for the last time, recognizing its giant anatomy before it gives itself to the river. The Amazon River dilutes itself here in Marajó, in the Atlantic Ocean that changes it, that waits to be touched by its sweetness. That is why our last program will take place totally in this remote region of the lower Amazon, so we can attend the spectacle that takes place at the mouth of the most powerful river on Earth. We have to use local transportation to travel along it. In the River Kingdom, the craft, as we have seen throughout the different episodes of this program, are varied. This is one, for example. It's a ferry, similar to our pontoons. That is, a motorized platform capable of transporting people, animals, and merchandise down the river's skin safely and without starts. We are arriving in Soure, the capital of Marajó, this large archipelago that is formed by river gravel before it disappears into the sea. We have been traveling for 6 hours since we left Belém de Pará, and the ocean will not be sighted until we have covered 100 kilometers. In spite of this, a real Amazon fishing port is found here. None other than this one, the Puerto de San Pedro. It's not a coincidence that 60% of the Soure population dedicates itself to fishing. Recently caught, it is already incorporated into the local cuisine on the very dock, with no intermediaries and no wholesale suppliers. When they're children, the inhabitants of this land learn the virtues and inconveniences of living by the river. They've grown up on it, and a large percentage will die in it. The crafts that do themselves up here do not know what the sea is like, and they don't need to. The river here is just as unpredictable as the sea and demands respect. Remember, the Sea River. These craft are called canoes here and have flat bows. The handrail that protects the stern and embraces the craft from front to aft, as well as the sail formation, timidly reminds us of the Spanish and Portuguese caravels. They have all been baptized and made of sapucaya and piquilla wood, 2 trees that belong to the jungle that feeds them. We have come here to discover a few ecological characteristics that give this last stretch of the river its personality. Marajó is not just an island. It is an archipelago that is formed by at least 2,000 sections of marsh, savanna, and jungle. The Amazon Delta, where buffaloes graze at ease, acts as a natural cork of proportions larger than the size of some European countries, such as Switzerland, Belgium, or Denmark. Yes, we said buffalo. The Asian buffalo, or water buffalo, at the mouth of the Amazon River. These images could have been taken in India or Southeast Asia, but they are fully Brazilian. This is one of the surprises that this river gives us on our last hours together. Besides beavers, jaguars, monkeys, and jacarés, this river also breeds buffaloes with overwhelming success. Cowboys here know how to handle horses just as well as they do a herd of buffalo, a population that here in the state of Pará is over 8 million head, a considerable number. Time seems to have stopped, bewitched by the river's potion. Sode is the largest of the islands that shape the Marajó archipelago. And in spite of being a crucial point on the commercial routes that join the Amazonia with the rest of the world, it still hasn't lost its air of timid paradise. Large haciendas share this lacustrine territory the greater part of the year. The owner of this one is Eva Maria Daé, in love with this land and a defender of its natural wealth, among which, of course, is included the buffaloes.
Vem cá, Rambo. Vem cá, meu filho. Ó, ele estranhou vocês. Vem cá, meu filho. Vem cá com a mamãe. Vem cá, é a mamãe. Vem cá.
No one knows for sure when the first Asian buffaloes arrived in this Amazonian territory. Some historians assure that it was due to a shipwreck that was transporting them from India to Recife in 1930. The pounding surf brought the first specimen here to Marajó, enraged and exhausted. Today, they are bred as authentic Marajonian products, fully adapted to their new environment.
Here we have the Muga breed originally from India, and the Yafarabá, which is also originally from India. Now here on our hacienda, I only have two breeds, the Mediterranean, which is this one, and the Carabao. At the moment, there are two other races bred in Brazil. All four are bred here. The buffalo here in Marajó means everything to us. It has three functions: meat, milk, and work. It's three functions. So now that we are in the dry season, it rains very little and everything is dry. The bovine cattle, the zebus, are weakened. They become very thin. But the buffalo, on the other hand, here it is. Some are thin, but the majority are fine. And during the winter, when everything is humid, it's the ideal weather for them, the ideal environment. Their ideal habitat is here. Marajó is perfect for the buffalo.
Of Lebanese origin, this woman abandoned her cultivated academic and cosmopolitan life and took refuge in her hacienda, caring for it with words and sensitivity. Every time she meets a neighbor, she conveys her ecological message of respect toward nature. The first people who should value the natural wealth of Marajó Island are its inhabitants. Not much tourism reaches here. Therefore, whatever is preserved will be beneficial for them and their children. Of the 4 buffalo breeds that are bred in Brazil, this is the most admired. Of docile behavior and horns that can grow up to 3 meters from one point to the other, the carabao is an impressive buffalo that sometimes brushes against the ground with its horns. Not even in Vietnam have we seen anything like this. The police officers of Soure prefer the Mediterranean breed for their cruising. Its strength allows them to travel without difficulty through a town that remains flooded 6 months out of the year. For the romantic traveler, the Iberian Peninsula is the bull hide, and this archipelago of the Amazon River is the buffalo hide, because the whole of this animal is put to good use. The saddles and even the boots that the officers use are made of its hide.
This animal is very easy to keep under control, easier than horses. It's an extremely docile animal. It won't easily rebel. And since 1933, the police force has taken on this singular characteristic, because we considered that in the eastern region, in the far eastern part of the world, buffalo patrols don't exist. The buffalo is a sacred animal there, and the truth is that our police force here in Marajó is the first and only one to use buffaloes for patrolling. In this original police force symbol, we can see a military officer on horseback, but today the buffalo is characteristic of us. We still continue working with horses, but we're far better known for being the police force that rides buffaloes.
The male buffalo can weigh up to 1,200 kilograms and is a very resistant animal, highly valued by the military police of Pará. Besides producing a milk that has a lot of fat, remember that mozzarella comes from these udders. Its meat is also delicious, and the hides are excellent for tanning. The Marajó buffalo is a unique means of transportation for the police, another whim of the Amazon River and its inhabitants. Large distances are covered here in this 149,000 square kilometer estuary by large passenger ships that grow slower with each crossing. We can't see the shores from here, but it's as if we were at sea. From this navigation point, there is a distance of 350 kilometers from shore to shore. But don't forget, in spite of what it may seem, we are still in fresh water. The inhabitants of the eastern Amazon spend half their lives on boats. Theirs is a liquid land, although it may seem the opposite. The only firm thing here is this global reality. Planet Earth should be called Planet Water. The Amazon River contributes to this by giving 20% of the world's fresh water to the sea. Each second of a domino game, of daydreaming, or a siesta, the Amazon will be sending 200,000 cubic meters of water to the sea, a natural phenomenon that is difficult for the human mind to assimilate, since we are used to looking no further than our own backyard. In spite of our trifles by the thousands, la nave va, the ship goes on, and the river cannot stop. Little by little, the ocean's presence is noticed. These urubus feed on it in spite of the fact that the corpse is on a beach, 100 kilometers away from salt water. Don't be fooled. The waves your eyes are contemplating come from the river. We are still on the Amazon River, but a sea dolphin has come here to die. The river has its own botos, which is what the two river dolphin species that inhabit the Amazon are called here. This, on the other hand, is a sea dolphin, a zoological quirk that results from the joining of the Amazon River and the Atlantic Ocean. Borderline nature right before our eyes. Another peculiarity of this region, a blend of river and sea, is the mangrove swamp. Here at the mouth of this enormous estuary, this flooded forest represents 1/5 of all the Brazilian mangroves. They represent the full vigor of a river that from its birth in the Andes, on the other side of Latin America, has never stopped sowing life. Man knows this, and hundreds of families find a living here. Dirtying yourself with mud up to your ears is unimportant when the reward is the crayfish of the Eucides cordatus species, a crustacean that was eaten, according to archaeological finds, by the inhabitants of this mangrove swamp thousands of years ago, and which everyone calls cangrejo usa. Fringing the line, feeling through this tepid mud called tijuco, and above all taking care not to fall upon the hideout of a poisonous snake, this tirador, as the crayfish collectors are called, works his morning out. The mangrove swamp is rough. The tiradores anoint their bodies with a mixture of gasoline and kerosene to repel the attack of the maruim, small insects with a big and powerful bite. A good tirador can feel the females of the species out by introducing their hands inside their hideouts and checking the way their claws are set. The female crayfish are called countesses and are never captured so they can continue reproducing. Apart from the aforementioned species, others such as the siri are well liked in the regional markets of Vej or Pesu and in Belém de Pará. In this large market of Amazon products, the crayfish are sold in cambadas, packages of 10 crayfish that cost $3. These creatures with an outer space appearance and an earthly taste produce a large amount of money. Official sources from the São Caetano de Odivelas Town Council provide crucial data. In 1990, from January to May, 8 million crayfish were sold. The law currently regulates this overactive business, limiting the seasons during which they can be captured. But only the common sense of the inhabitants of Pará can keep this river's wealth alive. This city was founded in 1616 by the Portuguese, who named it Nuestra Señora de Belém. Since then, the markets of Vej and Peso have witnessed the comings and goings of commercial business throughout the river. A royal decree issued by the Portuguese crown during the mid-18th century offered to each white man who married an Indian woman an axe, a pair of scissors, cloth, clothing, 2 cows, and 2 sacks of seed. By decree, the indigenous territory had to be populated by European blood, and this is the result, a human melting pot that feeds on the jungle. Apart from crayfish, there is cocoa, churu, carambolas, açaís, mucayás, urucus, fruits from the tropical forest unknown to the rest of the world. And ancient ointments, like dolphin, turtle, or lizard oil, to calm wild men down. Although it is also used in beverages to wake them up. Yes, you heard right, tropical Viagra. We find what we are looking for in this fish market. A fish, of course, but an oceanic fish, in spite of being hundreds of kilometers away from the Atlantic Ocean. Sharks like this one occasionally confuse the Amazon River with the sea and are caught. We are still on the frontier. The presence of sharks in the Amazon River is being studied by the INPA in Manaus, and that's where we're headed. This may be the only place on Earth where this phenomenon produced outside of the biological laws can be studied.
This is a shark specimen that was captured 50 kilometers from here. That is 1,500 kilometers away from the mouth of the Amazon River into the sea. This is a sea shark, but nonetheless it was found here in a freshwater system. This species belongs to the keratinide family of the Keratinus leucos species, originally known as the white shark, and is considered to be extremely voracious and dangerous to man. The entrance of this species into this region is sporadic, accidental, but those that arrive here adapt themselves perfectly well to the freshwater system.
A stroke of luck has us witness a recent capture. In Manaus, a member of the white shark family has just been captured, the sawfish. This is a scientific event of great importance that has just occurred and will continue occurring in these waters, as the doctor reminds us.
In Tefé, 2 fertile females have been discovered in the Iquitos region, which is over 3,000 kilometers away from the mouth of the Amazon. This species is a famous predator, and we are sure that they enter this region accidentally in the Solimões Amazon system. They enter pursuing large shoals of fish, continuing the chase upriver until they reach lakes and rivers of South America, which enables them to enter other water systems as far as Mexico.
The year 2000 bid farewell with important data. A scientific expedition finally situated the birth of the Amazon River precisely on the Andine map. On the snowy Nevado de Mismi, 5,300 meters high in the heart of the Peruvian Andes, a small spring of icy water sprouts at the foot of an ancient volcano, a spring that will grow during almost 7,000 kilometers until it reaches unmanageable dimensions, an artery that divides South America in two, about which we still know practically nothing. How is it possible for a river to have sea tides? Everything is possible here. The water level of the Amazon in its final stretch goes down to 200 meters. Children and dogs know this and play with the thriving waters, as did their heroic elders before them. The Syzygia tide is the hydric movement that takes place 3 days before or after a full or new moon. Apart from the floods that come from the intense rainfalls, the Earth and the Moon unite to cuddle the Amazon River. The estuary fishermen take advantage of the river's biorhythms to do their work. They do it punctually, with a fishing system as traditional as it is harmless. River culture, because these inhabitants are very familiar with these virgin beaches with no coconut trees and no crowds. This trap is called a corral and is no more than a labyrinth of sticks and nets that let all the river creatures pass through while the tide is high, later turning into an impregnable wall when the tide goes down. The fishermen just have to repair it periodically and take care not to step on the sometimes poisonous stingrays that camouflage themselves inside the schools of fish. If things are done well, there will always be a reward. The piramotabas, tambaquis, or tucunares will fill the nets with delicious protein. Later, the river moves again, like a living being, like a mother worried about her children's future. Before receiving the name it bears now, this water giant was baptized by the different cultures that enjoyed its presence outside of Brazilian territory, with names such as Apurimac or Ucayali. Even in Brazil, before bathing Manaus, the Amazon River is known as the Solimões River. Here, on the verge of giving itself to the ocean, it is just the river, the great river of the world. The latest estimates registered by satellite have it as the longest river on the planet, with a length of 6,885 kilometers. That is, 214 kilometers longer than the Nile. The joining of the sweet and traveled waters of the Amazon with the Atlantic Ocean is a geographic trauma. The salt water wants to go inland, and at the same time, a ship sailing 200 kilometers from the coast will find remains of vegetation, tree trunks, and fresh water in the middle of the ocean, a titanic struggle. This is the result of that struggle. An enormous wave 4 meters high that penetrates from the sea inland at 20 kilometers an hour. The pororoca, or porok in the Tupi language, rarely filmed, that occurs particularly during the month of April, sowing the peaceful lives of the inhabitants of the mouth of the Amazon River with uncertainty. The adventurous and playful spirit of the Brazilian people dominates this phenomenon since 1998, establishing in the state of Pará a peculiar surf championship on the back of pororoca. Less risky surfing can be enjoyed in Rio de Janeiro. Copacabana is a busy beach where remains of the prehistoric Amazonian culture can be found, although you may find it hard to believe. Ours is a purely anthropological interest, we'll have you know. We observe certain details. We are far away from the Amazon River, but the native women of Rio de Janeiro, unknowingly, wear a few of the characteristic traditional garments. Let's abandon Rio and return to the river. You'll soon see why. A Brazilian beauty, a beautiful woman. Beauty here in this beach that is at the mouth of the Amazon River has been strutting itself for many years, hundreds of years, among other things, with this garment, the tanga. She's wearing it, and don't think it's a modern-day garment. On the island of Marajó, archaeologists have discovered the Marajoara tanga. I have here an exact replica, perfect, just like the ones that women wore around here hundreds of years ago. It's a clay and plant fiber reproduction, which proves that tradition, culture, and dress strolled around here in the Amazon River at the beginning of time. And from there, we have taken these archaeological objects, tangas over 1,000 years old. Modern man thinks he invented everything. Long before the arrival of the Europeans, the estuary Amazon people toasted during the funeral rites dressed in these garments that were discovered in 1959. They belong to the Santarém culture and are decorated with interesting designs. Archaeologists know with accuracy that the Amazon River has been inhabited for at least 12,000 years, testimony to which are these clay tangas, or arrows of primitive quartz. The only archaeological department in Brazil that was housed within the University of Rio de Janeiro closed a few years ago due to a lack of expectation. Today, a prestigious private institution with which the state participates economically, the Museu Goeldi in Belém de Pará, studies on its own and with important results the prehistoric Amazon. Directed by Dr. Vera Guapindaya, these funeral urns and sacred contents have been studied over the past few years. Urns that belong to an important necropolis located in the region of the Maracá River.
Inside the urns that we are seeing now, in all of the urns we opened, we found bones. Detached bones belonging to complete skeletons. We found no funeral paraphernalia inside the urns. We have found things outside the urns. In the grotto, we found ceramic necklace beads and a few vessels. The vessels were outside. That was what the urns were accompanied by. But there was nothing inside. They were always outside. Ethnologists believe that some tribes cast the bodies to the river so that the fish would eat the softer parts of the bodies, and when the bones were picked clean, they would put them inside the urns and celebrate another ritual, a secondary ritual. We can also imagine that once the body had decayed, they would scrape the bones with stone instruments, and later put them inside the urns.
The Goeldi Museum holds in its collection several hundred funeral urns, where the artists of the past made it very clear which sexual group the deceased belonged to. Civilized inhabitants of the Amazon River. When this river is just a stream in its Andine origin, the natives call it Paranapitinga, clear river, referring to the crystal waters. Very close to here, at the mouth, the water is brown, painted with time and life. The old Amazon pushes the Atlantic Ocean strongly, trying to make its way. It has to spill 175 million liters of water in just one day all the water moved by the Thames throughout one whole year. With such mind-boggling figures, it's easy to imagine that besides water, the river furnishes sediments to the sea. And it's true. 800 million tons of Andean land wind up in the ocean every year. That's enough material to multiply 10 times over Brazil's most famous mountain, the Pão de Açúcar, or Sugarloaf Mountain, a miracle contemplated by the gods of Corcovado. Those of us who have made this series possible for you have not been unaware of this miraculous explosion of life. Believe us, we feel blessed by this river and its graces. We have been respectful witnesses to their intimate gestures. And you along with us. The men who threaten the Amazon River have been more slippery than the river itself. Daniel Garibotti, our producer, has tirelessly pursued them.
Bom dia.
But they were unwilling to disclose their sins.
Dr. Cecílio Almeida, por favor.
In spite of Daniel's efficiency, the destroyers of the Amazonia will not show their faces. The threatened fauna wasn't as picky. To have them pose for the camera was as difficult as having them stand before a gun sight, but without blood, nor guilty feelings. Without bullets, we have hunted down moments, secrets, the distrust of beautiful animals so that you could fall in love with the Amazon planet and its inhabitants. We have become involved so we could better understand the last call of this part of the world where so many things are happening. No animal was more important than another, although working with this silent 100-kilogram anaconda was something we enjoyed very much, as snake lovers can understand. The pet of some military outfit, like this ocelot, wanted to come out on television, and we let it. Although we did have to insist on our own creative criteria. Our technicians had a great time trying to combine electronics with the jungle humidity. But with patience, vocation, and trade, everything can be resolved. The cheekiness of some has done the rest. Six months of fieldwork, and much more than that of planning, have been needed to be able to photograph some of Brazil's gems that glow before the blindness of almost everyone. Snapshots that we now keep in our hearts.
Aquí está nuestro amigo, el oso hormiguero.
When Daniel Úbeda, Israel del Santo, and Javier Suarez climbed to the jungle rooftop, they did so accompanied by one who is very familiar with this kingdom, where the right to admission is reserved. Dr. Tania Sanayotti has been studying the Harpia eagle for a number of years, and our team covered her work at the heights. This is how one of the few young eagles born in the Brazilian Amazonia showed itself. The Harpia eagle is a threatened species, but there are people who are watching over it. Many times, we have had to leave the ground to be at the top of things. In the Pantanal, the breeding colonies of the big waders are 30 meters above our heads. And that's where we went with our cameras. There, we were received with noise and friendliness by these families of cabezas secas who wanted to meet you. The Brazilian authorities treated us with friendliness and companionship. The members of the SIGs, of the Army of Manaus, were very happy, as were we, the day several jacarés regained their freedom before the close observation of our camera. We traveled with the federal police and the IBAMA through the streets of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, exposing those who dealt in the illegal traffic of the natural heritage of the Brazilian people. Those days weren't easy. The illegal sale of animals is an important business, and a foreign camera is never welcome among the mafia. The wealth of the Amazon forest is also distributed among the mafia. We were able to see the face of the man who held the chainsaw. An injured tree fell too close. Its last lament was a big fright for us. It was not only our intention to make a pretty series. From the very start, it was our intention to share the pains of the Amazon. And none was as terrible as that of the natives that we interviewed in the midst of their struggle, a struggle for territory, dignity, and life itself. In the Kaiowá village, we felt disgusted for belonging to the tribe that forces them to commit suicide. We saw too many children with lost gazes. The gold fever has not been cured yet in 21st century Brazil, and we've traveled through some of its narrow circuits. With our camera, we wanted to find out how the garimpeiros earn their living and where they lose their lives. From Poconé to Sierra Pelada, our team followed the gold trail. And as did the gold diggers, we only found cold and sweat. But there was always a hummingbird that could bring the shine back. With water and sugar, Juan Luis was able to get these jewels to look into the mirror of our cameras more than once. The Amazonian wildlife has been kind to us and has accepted us. 6 months, 9 men, and a lot of kilometers traveled step by step, from Tabatinga to Marajó, always surrounded by creatures.
caigo los yacarés seguro, tío.
The Brazilian Amazonia, with all its splendor and whims, encouraging us and at the same time inviting us to leave with its malaria, its amoeba, and its uncontrollable geography. Without leaving Brazil, a country that is 17 times bigger than Spain, one can travel distances as large as all of Europe, and that's what we've done, in all kinds of aircraft. Unforgettable pilots like Walter or Fonseca made us land in incredible places with over 600 kilograms of filming material. Without them, this series would have been impossible. Major Dario took a great risk when he took us to the heart of the Xingu to interview a native chief who had been kidnapped by the Kayapo tribe when he was a child. It wasn't a very pleasant visit, but in spite of the prohibition, we were able to steal a few images of this mythical Indian, the Indian as white as a Swiss, Bemotire. That same day, we smoked a peace pipe with another woman integrated into the Kayapo culture, a black woman. She also had been kidnapped as a child. We had met our objective, to reveal one of the mysterious legends of the human condition that hovered over the humanized Amazonia. The new version of Little Big Man. In the Pantanal, thousands of kilometers away from the Kayapo and their liking for kidnapping, we shared moments with the Pantaneiros in the Bahia Don Bosco hacienda, and we willingly stood at the hooves of their horses. Without hurrying, but without dallying, we traveled in diverse manners, like on the island at the mouth of the Amazon River, Mosquito Island, where we went back in time to when the first European visitors arrived here. Aside from non-stop work, a television crew in our circumstances had to understand and make itself understood. We have interviewed over 50 people throughout our series. Frequently, a bit of acting direction was needed. Life is hard for these men. Their lives are threatened because they defend the lives of those who are threatened, the isolated Indians of the Javari River Valley. Thanks to their collaboration, it was easy to synthesize their work and just cause in a handful of images. We have tried to go unnoticed so as not to distort the tension with which they carry out their work and vigilance every day of the year, when there are no cameras around following them. The men who work in the Isolated Indians Department of the FUNAI live separated from their families for months on end, as we do. And their objective, as is ours, is to bring good news to the world. There are still indigenous tribes in the Amazonia who have not established contact with the white man. Their cause is to impose a strict respect for human rights for the defenseless in this tormented land. And we would feel very proud if we have contributed to this with our work. Brazil is a beautiful country, and it has not been a difficult task to depict it as such with our cameras. The diversity of its landscapes doesn't need to stop by makeup. It just has to know how to be at the right place at the right time and move on. In addition, Israel and Carlos, our sound technicians, have listened so the rest of us could hear. In this wild nature, many can speak, but are not always seen. Lati Maranya has taken good care of the photography, but not too good care of himself. It was necessary to get down all the details of Dr. Zilka Campos' night work, and of course, there had to be good lighting. You know how attracted insects are to light contamination. That night, the crocodiles weren't the most dangerous creatures. Manuela is an important part of Sidney Pozuelos' team. We owe him the realization of this series and a great deal of his beloved Brazil's ethnological health. Sidney was a friend of ours before this project began, but is even more so now, after having accompanied him for months on his particular campaign. He directs Brazil's Department of Interior Affairs, in charge of avoiding the massacre of the isolated Indians by our society. Pozuelo is of flesh and blood, naturally, but for some strange reason, his nature makes him incombustible. All those of us who inhabit this planet Earth need him, including the Zoe. João Lobato is the man that Sidney has directing the indigenous fortress that protects them. No other white man has gained the confidence and respect of these people like he has. With his valuable help, we were able to make the program dedicated to these human beings that captivated us from the very first moment. We became of age by their side and understood many things. Handmade happiness, custom fit to mankind. With surprising rules, such as not being able to bathe nude because we didn't have a little vegetable ribbon like theirs, tied on to the foreskin. We don't quite understand their devotion for the poturu either, but they find themselves attractive with the burnished stick in their chins, and there's nothing more to say. We lived for over 2 months in their paradise, and were different people, without fake nostalgia, feeling proud of belonging to our world, but having enriched it with their lucid sense of understanding. The Zoe are warm and vulnerable, and our cameras have depicted them just as they are, so you could get to know them, and so that those who want to do away with their essence know that millions of people are here to defend them. Having met them is our best reward. And what have they gotten out of meeting us? All we can say is that after having lived together for a long period of time, we all came away with tears in our eyes. 2 different tribes with one same heart, and this documentary is a tribute to such a profound meeting.
Vamos aquí al cuello, el cuellecito.
While we were editing the material for this program, we received the news of the death of Arad. That little grandmother fell asleep one night in the same hammock we enjoyed her sweetness in.
¿Qué tal? ¿Está bom?
Yes.
She died a natural death. She was over 80 years old. And we would give anything so that the rest of the members of her tribe could have that same death. I am on the last small Amazon island. Our journey ends here, so you can enjoy this spectacle, the flowing of the river into the sea. That's why we'll be leaving you on this helicopter, so that you can enjoy yourselves as I have, in this wonder, in this marvelous place. This is quite a photograph to remember. Ciao.